We're live, the next episode of Breaking Through the Noise. I'm your host, Jeremy Levier. Joining me for this episode, I'm excited to talk to Shane Jamison. Shane is from Shane Jamison Consulting, hyper growth sales leader and sales coach. So I got that right, Shane?
That'll work. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's dive in here. You know, a big thing that you do is sales coaching, right? So like, let's just dive in with we kind of before we started hitting record, when we were talking about what we were gonna like focus the episode on, was like, hey, we're halfway through the year. If you're a sales rep or a sales leader who might be struggling. Maybe you're a rep or leader and you don't know if you're going to have a job a month from now, or maybe you're struggling to hit your number. Obviously there's not a one size fits all approach that you take. And it's like you're going to say, oh, no matter what your situation you're in, do this and not
Right.
that. Like, but what kind of, where would you kind of start? If somebody comes to you and that's what they say, and they say, hey, Shane, I need help. Like, I'm not hitting my number. I don't know if I'm going to have a job a month from now. Like, what would you kind of start with, and what would you kind of say?
Yeah. First, what I want to do is really understand how they got where they're at in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, right? How do we end up where we're not hitting a number? The truth is, right at the beginning of the year, the reports came out and said that about 38% of sellers expected to hit their number this year. I'd be interested to understand how that's pacing. I haven't seen any updated stats halfway through the year, but I'm sure we will soon. And a big reason for that is not because of a seller being bad or good. It's often they're just not set up for success. And so really understanding and breaking down what steps have you taken to get you to this point. And now we can then we want to dig into their strengths and understand who they are as a person and what their natural abilities are. I think one of the misconceptions is sales. If I tell an audience, if I ask, picture a sales guy, what is the
Mm-hmm.
image that pops in everyone's head, right? It's like that used car sales guy, that sleazy guy. That's like this negative cultural perception of
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be in sales. And I think the problem with that is that we have, I don't know anyone really that sets out and wants to be that person, wants to be manipulative, wants to give off the ick, right? So,
Yep.
but the problem is that's what they see in culture. And I think that, really understanding what your strengths are, you don't have to be that silver-tongued pitch man that can sell sand to a beach, right? Some of the best sellers I've ever had on my teams or worked with were teachers prior to being a salesperson. They
Mm-hmm.
were project managers, product managers, right? And the thing is they leaned into their strengths and they understand what it took to be successful in the role. And then you understand those strengths and then you apply the fundamentals, right? Understanding what good looks like for your role and what you're trying to do. And then we can go and say, okay, what is our ideal customer? How are we going to do outreach? We can create a plan around that. What does a good discovery look like? What does a good demo look like? The truth is these guys aren't necessarily set up for success because they don't know what good looks like.
Mm-hmm.
They're in these companies that may have a good product, but they haven't invested that time. They've tried to make it a one size fits all approach, and people don't fit into that round hole all the time. And doesn't mean they can't be good. And that's what's really disappointing about the sales role in general is that so often like all the fault is put on the seller and like, oh, well, they just suck.
Yep.
And I've seen too many people turn it around. And it's because I think those that get into sales have a couple characteristics, right? They're ambitious, they're curious, they have some resilience. If you have those three things, you're coachable, like you can be a success in sales.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And so does a lot of it come down to like, the leadership, right? If they have those characteristics, maybe they're not hitting their number, you know, and so a lot of it can be, drawbacks in leadership where maybe, the leader, their sales leader is good, but they just don't, have that coaching,
Right.
capability. Obviously, like that's where you come in, right? Like that's your,
I mean,
where you kind of,
that's exactly where I come in. And the reason being is that I lucked out early in my career and I had a great coach and mentor in the company that I was at, right? And I
sure.
was able
Okay.
to grow from individual contributor to VP of sales and was able to lean on them for their expertise and guidance. And
Yep.
they weren't easy on me, but they saw some potential and they
Mm-hmm.
invested. The truth is that we had a culture of coaching, right? It was a
Mm-hmm.
culture of results. And in order to achieve those results, coaching is about awareness and accountability. And so that was just part of our regular cadence and sort of how
Mm-hmm.
we interacted on that floor. And I think that I credit that to that leader.
Mm-hmm.
But I left there expecting every role to have that. And I
Oh
realized pretty quick
yeah.
that's just not the case. Some people aren't
Mm-hmm.
aren't destined to be that. And I think there's a few reasons as to why. One, I think a lot of leaders, especially in the last 5 years, were promoted into leadership because they were on the right side of demand, right? Like the market was good, the product was good, and they executed. But they didn't necessarily have a repeatable, scalable, teachable system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they during that time there wasn't a lot of coaching going on. When things are flowing, the money's flowing, like we don't need to coach. So that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
first things to go. And so they get into a leadership role and then they've never seen good coaching. And so there's this confusion as to what good coaching is, right? We've got they 80% of sales leaders say they coach, 40% of sales reps say they get coaching. Like, why is there such a big gap there? And it's because sales leaders believe, like, we get into a deal review or a forecast review and I tell you that, oh, you should be multi-threaded in this deal. And then it's like, oh, I did my coaching, right? But those things are all deal reviews, forecast, pipeline, things like that. Those are all about the company. And real coaching is really about the rep and how can we maximize their potential within the current playbook. And so that isn't talking about those things, but really understanding how, what they're saying and doing. And so that, to me, that takes not only the preparation and practice, but that is about watching the game film and
Mm-hmm.
moving past just the story that's being told in these deal reviews and really listening and seeing what's happening. Because without that, salespeople, man, we delude ourselves. We think we did all the right things and we tell ourselves a story. But then when you pull up the game film, you're like, oh, I didn't ask that question. Oh, I made an assumption there. I assumed they meant this when they really meant this.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of extra work. And we really do that at scale when you've got a team in order to do that. I mean, it just takes a lot of work. And if they haven't done it before, they haven't seen what good looks like, they resort to what they know how to do, which is either they manage the numbers and the spreadsheets, or they want to just jump in and hop on the calls with the customers and do the selling themselves.
A lot of good stuff there, Shane. Where I would go next is from what your experience, like where do you see deals fall by the wayside, or like reps struggling? Is it typically more, like you said a couple times there in the game film, like is it, and it might be all over the place, like not one size fits all, but like maybe, more times than others, are you seeing it's like in that first call, during that discovery call, where, the rep is missing things, like you're saying, they're assuming things that the prospect said certain things? Or is it usually a little bit further along in the funnel, like they get a deal into the funnel, like maybe it's during the, getting, multiple stakeholders involved, the multi-threading thing that you touched on? Is it maybe that they're just not getting, I don't know if a lot of your clients use Medic, they didn't get, they were missing some of the Medic stuff. Where, is it like maybe during a legal process or getting executive buy-in, or is it top of the funnel prospecting? Where is there maybe one area that you see that reps are typically missing and struggling with the most?
Yeah, I think if you have a closing problem, if you're not closing enough business, then you really don't have a closing problem. You have a discovery problem. And that's what it all comes down to, because those other pieces break down because we didn't do effective discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And discovery is more than just asking the questions, right? That we want answers to. It's really about helping the prospect start asking the questions that they should be asking themselves, right? Like that's what we're doing. We want to get them thinking about the problem. Often these people haven't articulated the problem well. They've got some vague feeling that things could be better. And the truth is they haven't really worked through that. What is that problem? Let's clearly articulate that. What is the impact of that problem? And really understand why this person would do this. If we don't know the problem, we're not going to be able to really solve anything. Right. And so most people miss it in discovery. They ask all the right questions, maybe they go down the list, but that person, they haven't connected with that person. That person hasn't brought down their guard. So they are just giving that surface level response, and we're not going
Mm-hmm.
any deeper.
Yep.
And so that is really where that is the keystone. Everything else will be supported by that. And if we're not doing that well, which I see over and over, then it doesn't really matter. People will go along with the process because they don't want to disappoint you. And then what
Yeah.
happens? You just end up chasing them because they don't want to disappoint you with a no, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got this miserable maybe that just wastes everyone's time. And so it really does come down to the discovery. All those other pieces are going to be made better because of effective discovery. And there are definitely things that can be done. And if you're doing discovery well, you're probably going to be closing enough business, but you want to get better. Then we start looking at those different pieces. Most people, though, don't realize what their numbers are. And so they don't understand where it's breaking down, right? Meaning, like, how many meetings does it take to get to an opportunity? Does it take to get to a demo? Does it take to get to proposal stage and all the different stages? They don't really know what those are at their level. They just know that I've got to hit $1 million quota, and that means I need $4 million in pipeline. And if those things aren't happening, then that's all they see. But in sales, we can't just focus on those outcome numbers. We've got to focus on the process and really, really fall in love with that process. To the other point, with you talked about like MEDDIC and methodologies, I think all of those are really important and right, especially MEDDIC during the discovery phase. And I'll just say this is discovery just doesn't happen in one call, right? It happens at every interaction with them.
Sure.
But it is, most of these, they say, hey, we use MEDDIC. We need to identify, all these different elements of this qualification methodology. But then it's never really talked about again in the deal reviews, the sales, coaching sessions. It's just kind of like, here's a guide to use. But I think that comes down to good coaching and good leadership, is that we're always talking with that at the keystone of all of our conversations, at the cornerstone of all of our conversations.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, reps can sound like robots when they ask MEDDIC questions or they ask BANT questions. You
Right.
obviously know what I mean by that. Like if they ask, it's kind of sounds scripted, and it's just like they're trying to check that box. Oh, I got that MEDDIC thing checked off, or I got the BANT thing, and then they kind of sound like a robot. And like, do you think that's just kind of that's like role play though? Do you need to kind of do role play to be able to like ask those questions that you need to ask and get that information and do that discovery without sounding like a robot, with sounding like a human and having it be organic? Like, do you kind of, is that like, you said game film is like a lot of what you kind of work with clients on, like role playing before a call and then after a call, kind of breaking down, like looking at the recording and breaking down the film. Is that what a lot of it comes down to?
I mean, like, think about a football team. If the coach just handed out the playbook and then said, show up on Sunday and play the game, it's probably not going to go well. Even if they've memorized everything, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to go well for them. And so we can't skip those steps. And so often we do, but that is a leadership and a cultural problem if they're not doing those things. So yes, it is role play, but it's that it is how you get good at those things is through preparation and practice, and then reviewing the game film and going back and refining what you were doing. But most people don't want to do the preparation or practice. Maybe they memorize some questions they should be asking, but like, how does that fit into a conversation with another human? Right? We don't have, if we're just interacting with another human, we don't have like some predetermined set list of questions that we need to ask in the day-to-day interaction, right? So how I approach this is that in order to be loose, you have a script running in your head, whether you believe you do or not. So if you're going to have a script, make it intentional and get good at it. And how I approach that is, let's prepare. Let's say it's a first call meeting, a discovery meeting, like understanding deeply like who your buyer is, what their role is, and what, coming with a perspective, meaning understanding what their pains, their goals, their challenges, what they're trying to achieve, initiatives in their companies, what those are going into it. Doesn't mean you're going to be right, but you're coming with a perspective. That's going to help guide the situation, right? We're putting ourselves in their shoes, and we're showing up ready to have a real conversation. Doing that preparation, understanding what the ideal outcome of this meeting, what's the purpose of this meeting, what's the ideal outcome, walking through those different steps. As I'm doing that research, writing down questions, 5 to 10 questions that just pop up in my head that I am curious about. Oh, I saw that you were at a competitor or at a company that used our competitor a year ago. Like, that's really interesting. What can I say about that? How can I bring that up in the conversation? Because that's probably going to get them talking, because you're coming there and showing that you've done your research and adding some credibility to this conversation. They're more likely to open up to you. So doing that preparation, practicing that, I think role play, if you can role play, what's great now is that we can just do that. We can turn on the camera and just role play with ourselves. We don't have to be in a group in the office and everyone's, going around doing that. That helps too. But doing like just that one piece of preparation, that's going to set you up for success. Then understanding how we frame that conversation, like once we're in the meeting, how do we frame this conversation so that it can be one that is productive? And what most reps do is they get through, talking about the weather or some BS rapport building exercise, and then they immediately start jumping into those BANT questions or those medic questions. And it's just like, whoa, where's this coming from? Right. And so understanding, like, how do we frame this conversation? Hey, I've got us down for this much time. You're going to have some questions. I'm going to have some questions. I'll do the best to answer them now. Here's what, if everything goes well, here's what let's spend the last 5 minutes talking about next steps. Does that sound fair? Great. What were you hoping to learn today? And then just getting into it. But now we framed it so they understand what's going to happen. Most people show up to a call, if they're a buyer or prospect, expecting to just get pitched, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to know that going in, like, how do we lower their guard so they're not on the defensive and we can get down to the problems and understand if we can help them or not.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. Like, I had a call just like in the last week or two where the prospect was like, what do you got? What do you got? What do you got? Or the way they said it was like, just tell me short and to the point. Like, what do you got that's going to help me with, with generating more pipeline or with hitting my sales number? Like, we got a team of 40, we blah, blah, blah. What do you got? So to your point, like they just they're expecting to get pitched. Like, so and this will be the last question, like in that scenario, how would you go about kind of like reframing that conversation and like getting them to lower their guard, so they're not just like, oh yeah, what do you got? Just show me what you got. Like, just tell me the price, just tell me the price, whatever that, whatever.
Well, again, I can give you the elevator pitch and tell you what we got, but I don't even know if it's going to be the right fit for you. I mean, I think what we need to understand are a few things, and depending on the product, right, I'd have a set of questions that I'd ask so that I can understand if this is going to be a fit. So, hey, if I could just ask a few questions, help me understand this, then I'm going to be better able to direct you and provide a solution. What we have to do is, we don't need to go in there and pitch. And if someone's wanting to do it, they're doing the wrong way. Maybe that's not going to be a great fit for you. So before you even get to that, even if they're pressuring you, I think you have to reframe the conversation and make sure we get to kind of an even playing field, or at least aligned on what we're both trying to get out of this and what the ideal outcome is going to be. And then just before you can get into that. And then once you get, lay that groundwork, now we're able to have a real conversation. So that is, again, if you did your research, it's not every conversation is going to go the same way, right? You're going to have those curveballs and those people that come at you really hard. But if you did your preparation and the research, you're going to be prepared to pivot. You're going to be able to what the roadmap is. And, we're taking a little bit of detour here, but I know how to get back to the main road and take us to where we're going.
Yeah, it sounds like, the key, one key at least, is getting them in the beginning, pretty early as possible in that first conversation, like you said, to lower their guard and not just get them being like, oh, what do you got? Just show me what you got. Just tell me the price. Just, show me the demo, whatever.
If that's the case, we can just send them a video recording, right? Here's a link to a webinar. You can just watch that, see if it'll be a fit for you. Right. If that's what we want to do.
Exactly. And like, but you want to somehow say something that gets them to the point where, like, I've had sales leaders in the past that have kind of used this analogy. I don't know if you've heard this one, where it's an analogy of, it could be different ways of phrasing it, whether two people hiking a mountain together, or two people sitting in a car together trying to drive to the same destination. They're at point A, they're trying to get to point B, and at point B is maybe that's a water park or a vacation destination, like, but maybe they're lost and they don't know how to get there. They got to work together. So they got to work, it's like a team rather than two people, the other analogy is like two people on the other side of the table. You want to be on the same side of the table, as opposed to visualizing a conference room where buyer and seller, they're on this opposite sides of that conference room table. You want to kind of get both on the same side of the table, so you're both like, on the same team, kind of working towards a shared goal and kind of getting them to buy into that. And if they don't, is obviously, it's easier said than done. Like, that's where you can kind of come in and help them. But, if they don't, like, if they kind of, you try, do you kind of just like, if somebody's just like kind of being difficult, or they're kind of being an asshole or something, like they just refuse? Oh no, you try to do it, and then they still are just like, no, just show me the price. Just tell me the price. You kind of just like cut bait and be like, okay, if this is a really difficult person, their personality, like this, they're just being difficult. Like they're the kind of person that you're at a restaurant and they're just kind of making a scene and yelling and like kind of just being an asshole. Like, you kind of just be like, all right, it might be the best use of our time to, just end the call here. I wish you the best of luck. And, just
my goal,
end it politely.
Right. My goal is to be able to add value in every interaction. And I don't want to be a jerk about it. If they're being a jerk, it doesn't mean I'm going to, immediately hang up on them or tell them off and say that this isn't going to work. But I'm going to find as many ways as possible. I think, again, going back to preparation, if I really understand my buyer and the industry that they're in and what the problems in general they're trying to solve, I'm probably going to start there and say, hey, if you are this person, typically these people are dealing with X, Y, and Z problems. I'd be curious to hear how you're approaching it. So just finding a way to get into their world and show that you understand what they're going through. And if that's still the case, you're finding different angles to, again, be able to add value, give them something more than just price, which then just turns us into a commodity, right? And that's a lot. Then everything's made on price. And if they do it, we have no control and we're not really helping them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Someone like that, I mean, if they're a real jerk, like, why do we want them as a customer? Right. I mean, if we can't find a way to stand on solid ground together, then it's probably not going to be a fit, and let's move on. But in my career, I mean, I've got 20 plus years in sales and every type of sales there is. And I can think of a handful of those,
Sure.
Now, when I was just doing cold calling and making 100 calls a day, I got a lot more of those, right?
Yeah.
A lot more of those go pound sand conversations. But most people are reasonable, right? And I never, and the thing is that we may have that interaction today. In 3 months, they've forgotten about me in that interaction, and I'm gonna approach it fresh. Like, I'm gonna still reach out to them if I think they're a fit. I'm gonna approach it fresh and see if we can't find a way to work together. If I think they really are a good fit, could use our solution.
Yeah, and I like that, what you're saying about how you can try to, usually from your experience, it seems like, get them to let their guard down. And especially like if you can, if they're kind of, being like, oh, tell me the price or show me what you got, like maybe kind of, there might even be like raising their voice. If I would think, if you can stay calm, don't raise your voice, if you stay calm and make sure to tie it back to the problem. If there's a problem, that you think that, that they're trying to solve, like, tie it back into their job, their role. Like, what are they trying to solve for? What are they trying to, what are their goals and priorities? What are they trying to accomplish? It's like connecting the dots, right? Like, your product, solves this, and if there's such a difference between what your product solves for and what one of their priorities might be, well, you wouldn't even be on that call with the person, right?
Exactly.
Like, so it's just trying to find, level with them and find if there's a fit, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and kind of just, get them reframed, and then be able to ask some questions and get them to open up. Cool. Any other things that you would add? I know we're a little bit, we're over at least the 30 minutes we scheduled for this, Shane. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to kind of add that relates to what we've discussed here?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, and I'm speaking to sellers, I'm speaking to sales leaders, is that your company is not going to save you. your success is not dependent on them providing the right playbook or how you should execute that playbook. I think the best performers as a sales leader or salesperson, they seek out the help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that, okay, the company that it's not here, that's okay. I know they have a good product. I know we have a great solution. I'm still going to be successful because I'm going to find that mentor. I'm going to find that coach. I'm going to join a community of like-minded people that are trying to accomplish the same thing as me. I'm going to do the courses and the workshops. Those are the people that consistently outperform. And so take control. Build your own playbook. Get good at understanding what good looks like, and then continue to work on that and bring in those outside sources, because it's so easy to access them now. You can do it for free. You can pay for it. There's lots of different ways, but don't sit on your rear and not do anything and just get through halfway through the year and be like, oh, well, the leads aren't coming in, so I can't do anything about this.
Yeah, exactly. Don't, and then you lose your job or you're just not hitting your number. Yeah. Well, don't be afraid to call Shane, right? Connect with you on, find Shane on LinkedIn if you're looking for a sales coach, right?
Right. Find me on LinkedIn.
Shameless plug there.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn. My website, shanejamison.com. You can go there, schedule some time to book, or you can book it from my LinkedIn profile. But let's chat. I'm happy to have a conversation and see if there's a way that I can help or at least point you in the right direction.
Cool. Appreciate it, Shane. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate you.